and welcome to the Williamson County Public Library, and welcome to our first in the 2025 Alzheimer and Dementia series. And we appreciate you being here. For this program, we'll be having Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia with Dr. Hutchings here. And our next program will be Keep Your Brain Healthy and Prevent Risk of Alzheimer's with Dr. Jeanette Norden. That will be on May the 27th at 1:30. And then, as you can see on the side, we do have some books and more resources, as well as some information on future programs in the Alzheimer's series, and as well as some snacks and other goodies provided by the Alzheimer's Association. And we are very honored to work with Alzheimer's Association for these programs. And again, we deeply appreciate our speaker, Dr. Hutchings.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. Could y'all hear me okay with my mic? Okay. I was proactive and called my brother before I got up here because I recently put my brother's car for sale in the paper. It was a brand new Altima for $2,000, just so he'd keep getting phone calls about the car. So hopefully I don't get any text messages on my computer. I actually also zip tied a harmonica to the front end of his car, so it probably won't sell. So anyway, appreciate y'all coming out. Listen, I'm a firm believer in the mind can only comprehend what your bottom can endure. Okay, so the longer I talk, probably the less you're going to listen. I will try to keep it around 50, 60 minutes and make sure we leave plenty of time for Q&A, okay? Awesome. And I may pull one of y'all up here in a little bit to talk about hospice as well, all right? Sorry to put you on the spot. So again, I'm Dr. Hutchings. I'm a certified dementia specialist. This is all I do. When we're on vacation and my wife is reading her novels, I'm reading neurojournals. This is all I do. It's the only patient population I see. I contracted with Blue Sky House Calls a number of years ago because I opened up private practice. I started seeing patients. I could not handle all the patients I was seeing, the office stuff, so I hired on with Blue Sky House Calls at that point. I service everywhere in Middle Tennessee. So Blue Sky House Call does primary care, and I'm the only Alzheimer's specialist on staff. So I will go anywhere from here to Pulaski to Hendersonville, all over the place, all the facilities, all the memory care facilities and all that. I really like today's topic because one of the most common questions I get a lot is what is the difference in Alzheimer's and dementia, right? I'm sure that y'all get that question quite a bit. And so I want to make sure when you come out of this is that you have a clear understanding of what that difference is, the different types of dementia. And I always say this in lectures too, is that if somebody came to me and said that, if an oncologist came to me and said that I had cancer, I would want to know, what's the first question you'd ask? What kind? What's the second question? How bad? What stage is it? And the third question is, what the heck are we going to do about it, right? So we should be asking those same questions when it comes to dementia. I can't tell you countless times I get a patient referral and it just says dementia. And I have no idea what type of dementia I'm dealing with, what type of stage. And I'll get into the staging, all that here in a little bit, but it really helps us kind of predict where we are and how things progress and helps us modify that plan of care and change things as we're moving along, okay? And then I do have a couple, kind of an off-topic thing I want to talk about that we see a lot with our dementia folks is the onset of pneumonia. So I want to discuss that a little bit too. So let's jump in. My 19-year-old son was prepping for a speech last night, and so I was giving him pointers on how to speak. And I said, don't read him the slides. Don't do that. You don't want to read to your audience. So you can read this yourself. But basically, one of the things I hear all the time is that why are we seeing more and more and more dementia that we weren't seeing 20, 25 years ago? Well, we can definitely diagnose more types. Number one, we're diagnosing it early. Number two, and then also people are not living longer. Like you can get on Dr. Google and start looking at all the statistics and you say, well, no, they are living longer. No, they're living longer with chronic diseases. We're living longer with congestive heart failure, with diabetes, all these things, which definitely can increase our risk for developing dementia. But if you do look at the stats, one of the articles I like to look at is it talks about this silver tsunami versus this gray tsunami. So the silver tsunami has roughly 7,800 or 918 people per hour turning 65, and a diagnosed, and so that's like roughly 330 people per hour. But if you go down here and say that by mid-century we're pretty much there, every 33 seconds there's going to be a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. That's only one type of dementia. Okay, so going back to that cancer analogy, just so you can understand, is if cancer is an umbrella, and underneath that umbrella we have all these different types of cancer, correct? We'll take that umbrella and make it dementia, and we have Alzheimer's disease, we have Lewy body, we have vascular, we have all these types that fall under that. So that's the difference in the two. But so that's what we call the silver tsunami. So this is the gray tsunami of all these patients. I mean, every 33 seconds, somebody's getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and that's only one type of dementia, y'all. So you think about adding in all the others, God knows what that number truly is. And it doesn't just happen to old people. It doesn't happen to people that are just 80 years old. I did a referral this morning, somebody with a date of birth of July of 1981. So it's not just happening to older people. But if you look at the overall cost to Medicare, $3 out of every $5 goes to Medicare. And if you kind of break this down into facilities, almost like 86% of dementia patients are in assisted living. I'll talk about behaviors here in a little bit, but of that 68%, 34% have significant behavioral problems. We'll discuss that as well. And then about 27% of those patients are considered to be moderate to severe. So let's talk about dementia versus aging. Now, I know my brother's frustrated at me right now, but one of the things he was saying, it's going to be so much, I'm going to keep renewing that ad, by the way. One of the things he was telling me the other day, he's like, my neighbor, she's just getting older and she's just getting dementia. Like, this is something that's a part of the normal aging process. It is not. Believe it or not, memory loss is not a part of the normal aging process. Your brain is this supercomputer that processes 4 million things a second. And basically, it begins to kind of slow down in its processing as we get older. Is anybody over the age of 30 in here? All right. So by the age of 30, your brain starts to change and begins to shrink in weight and volume by roughly 15 to 23%. It starts to shrink. So with that, we're going to have some slower processing, those types of things. Anybody walk into a room and forget why you walk in there? Those things are normal, okay? Dementia is not. It is a neurological disease that affects way more than memory. And I cannot emphasize that enough. It does impact way more than just memory. So I have these kind of out of order here. So yes, we have some impaired intellectual functioning. We definitely see personality changes. We see a lot of focus about finances. Those types of things becomes a big issue. We have behavioral issues, which I'll talk more about that too. And basically, if you think about dementia and not only impacting memory, your brain controls everything in the human body. Everything in the human body. How you walk, how you talk, your personality, everything. And dementia is going to affect every bit of that. And it is simply just not a part of the normal aging process. How many of you knew that dementia is actually an acronym? So we walk through this, and before we want to say this person truly has dementia, we want to make sure we kind of mark stuff off the list. Okay, the last patient I had before I came here this morning, very sweet lady. She had some moderate to severe concentration issues. She had some moderate short-term memory loss. There's a little 30-point test that I gave her. She had a 16 out of 30 on that assessment, which would indicate dementia, but she's very depressed. She's lost 40 some odd pounds. Her mom had actually committed suicide. So she has all this depression that's going on. So we got to get that fixed before we can say this is actually truly a dementia. Especially with polypharmacy. I mean, how many with being clinical? A lot of our patients come to us and they're on 35 or 40 pills. So we don't know if the medications are causing some of the memory loss. It could be certainly related to the endocrine system. It could be metabolic. It could be epilepsy, nutritional, toxicity. It could be more blood flow issues. So we kind of want to ask ourselves all these questions before we just go in there ablaze and say, okay, this person has a progressive neurological condition of dementia. So I always bring this lady to this title of the speech, Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia, because I had a chance to meet her family years ago. Grace Kirkland was incredibly fascinating. She was the first person to actually be filmed from the moment she was onsetted to later on as she progressed. Her husband was an amazing man. He actually did, I think he was a professor of physics at Johns Hopkins University. And I mean, she's like most of the people that we know, right? She loved to go to church. She loved to cook. She loved the choir. She loved to sew. And so as I go through and start to really get us to have a better understanding of dementia, and I want to kind of bring Grace through in this presentation throughout the entire time. So pay attention to the video, because I'm going to ask you a couple questions after each video.
And tomorrow's Sunday, isn't it?
Is tomorrow Sunday?
Tomorrow's Sunday. What do you do on Sundays?
We go to church and sing a song, sing. So,
What songs do you sing in church?
Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so.
What about, do you sing, glory, glory?
Glory to hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. He's coming again to take me to heaven.
That was a nice end. You put a different end on it than I know.
Riddle, R-I-D-D-L-E, R-I-D-D-L-E.
You got that one real fast.
Well, I work these old puzzles so much, and I know, and S-Q-U-A-R-D-A-N-C-E.
Guess you found it already.
I can see these in my sleep almost.
So what do we see out of Grace first? What do y'all see? Very childlike, yep. So frontal issues already, language problems. She's kind of lost that personality. What else do we see? Agitated, yeah. She was very agitated, especially her environment has changed, right? So if we have patients and they are in a facility or at home and we take that patient, we move that patient, guess what happens to that patient? They decline, exactly. So the goal is, that's why I do a lot of home visits, is I want to try to keep the patient in their home for as long as I possibly can. That's a very good comment. What else do we see?
I was surprised she was able to do that puzzle.
Yeah, yeah.
That was kind of amazing.
Yeah, and actually she was using sewing materials. I noticed that too, yeah. And with that being said, let me switch it up a little bit, because I think in the medical field, we're so quick to point out what patients can't do, but we're not very good at talking about what they can still do. What could she still do? Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head, because she never actually spoke. She sang to communicate. So she can still do a lot, right? And so some of the things that we see that are not a part of the normal aging process, frequent memory lapses for sure. Like I said, the paranoia over money, difficulty learning new materials, repeating questions, those types of things. And, whenever I do Zoom meetings with families and stuff, and they always come to me and say, God, now that we know all this has been going on for 10 years. And I always tell patients and families, like, give yourself some grace. Nobody ever just picks up on this immediately because it happens so slow. But as I get into prevention and staging here a little bit, I cannot stress, and I'll talk a little bit about medications that help with memory. I can't stress the importance of early detection and early assessment. That is really, really key, okay? And the other thing is I cannot stress, do not put your head in the sand and ignore this disease. This is not a disease that if you get behind on it, it is incredibly difficult, because we have not only one person, the actual patient themselves that is a patient, but we also have the caregiver, we have the wife, the children, financial. It is a disease that affects everybody. So when I go in to see a patient, I don't have just one patient. I have you as my patient. I've had you as my patient. And we have to look at that and really take into account the caregiver burden, which I'm going to harp on here in a couple of minutes. So we have about 85 different forms of dementia that are out there. Believe it or not, most dementias are not progressive and can be fixed, which that sounds kind of weird, but we can fix those. Patients that are getting cognitive impairments from polypharmacy, or it's a thyroid issue or depression or whatever it may be. But when we look at the progressive dementias, the one I'll talk about today, obviously Alzheimer's disease, I'll discuss that. I'm going to talk about Lewy body, which now is the second most common form of dementia over vascular dementia. So I'll talk about vascular as well, and I'll do FTLD, the frontal temporal. But what they all have in common is the 5 A's. And we have the amnesia, the memory loss. If you look at frontal temporal lobe patients, they don't have the short-term memory loss until later on sometimes. And then one of the biggest pet peeves, have you ever heard of the word salad? I hate that term. That is a pet peeve. I'm glad I'm being filmed saying that, so it's documented. It's aphasia. Just like if somebody has a stroke, they lose the ability to talk, right? Well, same thing happens in dementia. They kind of go into the filing cabinet in the brain. They just can't find the file, and they're unable to come up with a word. And whenever we see word finding starting to go down, we definitely start to see the short-term memory start to slip at the same time, okay? So we do have communication problems. We also have what we call apraxia. So I'm going to tease you real quick. Yeah, so just write your name down there.
My name?
Yeah, with that hand.
Oh, with my left hand?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, no, okay. No pressure, okay. Oh, gosh.
So if you want to feel what it feels like for a dementia patient.
You really have a hard time with
Oh, yeah, this is bad, guys.
That is, actually it's better than my normal handwriting.
This is pretty messed up then, yeah. Oh.
Good. Actually, it's not that bad. So you were a poor person to pick. Okay. right. That's nicer than my handwriting. But if you try writing a sentence with your non-dominant hand, that takes an incredible amount of concentration, right? Now take that over something so simple, like taking a bath or walking or eating, whatever it may be. So apraxia essentially is this the cell phone signal from the brain, the top of the brain, to the arms and the legs, okay? And that's where we start to have some motor problems. We start to see shuffling gait patterns. We start seeing falling. We start seeing other symptoms that come into place. So the apraxia is something that we have to look for. Agnosia is incredibly difficult. Basically, I think I have a picture of this. Yeah. So, and I'll go back. This is what it looks like. And don't ask me to pronounce this guy's name, okay? He was an artist. And he would do self-portraits, started in 1967. Do you see after he was diagnosed in 95, but you could see as he did self-portraits what that began to look like. This Thursday, I will be married for 21 years, and I cannot imagine what it would be like if my wife came to me and said, "Who are you?" I don't know what I would do. Or where are we for our home? And she doesn't recognize her home. Maybe she takes a toothbrush and she combs her hair with it. Or she doesn't know how to eat and because she doesn't understand the utensil, what it's for. That's agnosia. The brain is not able to connect a memory with the object or the face or the environment. This is where we can have elopement issues, we can have behaviors, and so there's things that we have to put in place to be able to keep that patient safe in their environment. So I'll get to the staging here in a little bit, but when we get to the staging and I can go and say, okay, this person is a stage 5.2, I just want you to look out for if they don't recognize you, this is what you need to do, all right? And so it doesn't catch them by surprise. To be able to know what's coming next is truly key. I want to talk about attention because could you imagine taking a autistic child and putting them in Cracker Barrel after church on Sunday? What would happen to that poor kid? Exactly. So as we always approach the holidays, I get questions all the time. Hey, do you think it's okay if we take mom out of memory care? We're having a Christmas gathering with the family. And my response is absolutely not. I would say bring only a couple people to memory care and visit her here. Because once you take her out of that structured environment, all the kids, all the stuff that's going on, what's going to happen to her? The brain can't filter all that. So all of a sudden her anxiety is going to skyrocket. So that's something that just to kind of keep in mind for sure, because all the dementias have these 5 A's in common. All right, So let's jump into the types of dementia. I'm going to spare you a little bit because I do have 4-hour lectures on each one of these. So I don't want to, again, mind can only comprehend what your bottom can endure, right? But I don't want to talk too deep in like the neuroscience world. I want us to understand the pathology behind this, okay? So we do have Alzheimer's. There are different types of Alzheimer's disease, okay? Again, this 41-year-old I had, this is not late onset Alzheimer's disease. This is a different gene, and you know, I don't have to go into all that. We could reverse vascular Lewy body now because Lewy body is the second most form of common dementia. I remember when I was finishing up my clinicals, I was shadowed with a neurologist, and I had mentioned Lewy body, and this was in 2009. And he said, well, that's just a textbook term. And now look, Robin Williams brought this to light. And we have the frontal temporal with Bruce Willis. That's bringing this to light. So we're starting to understand there's so many more different types. And every one of these are so different, and the care plans are different. So in Alzheimer's disease, essentially what's happening is if you have a document up on your computer and you close it and you don't save it, the computer can't retrieve that document. Okay, so that's what's happening essentially. The memories are not being stored, therefore they can't be retrieved. And neurons are like my little 14-year-old daughter on her cell phone. They love to chat back and forth all the time. But when we have these genes that mutate, what happens is that the brain can no longer digest all those fats and lipids. So basically it forms a plaque over the neuron. And now they're unable to talk back and forth. But also the structure of the neuron looks like a railroad track, all right? And so if we had a railroad track, and if we took the parallel bars and we took the perpendicular bars away from it, what would happen to that railroad track? There's no structure anymore. So now we just begin to shift and tangle. And this is where we see what we call the atrophy. So when you do the MRI, you'll see on the screen, or even in the report, it'll say cerebral atrophy or diffuse atrophy. That just means that these neurons now the brain has begun to shrunk in the areas that we see for short-term memory, language, that kind of stuff. This is typically, from a memory standpoint, this is where we have patients that say, oh, I can remember everything from years ago, but I can't remember anything right now. That's more of a what we call late onset. Late onset Alzheimer's disease is simply just defined by we acquired it sometime around the age of 80, okay? But the problem is by the time we diagnose it and we find it, it's been going on for 10 years already. And I read a study the other day that said that we can see the mutation of the gene up to 15, even 20 years prior to us even seeing symptoms. So it does take, and that's the late onset tends to be one of the slower moving ones. So with the apolipoprotein number 4, okay, there's going to be a test afterwards. I'll check for spelling, all right? That gene is the most common. Let me back up. Have you all seen the movie Still Alice? Okay, a couple people have shaken hands. Okay. What's interesting about that movie is who helped contribute to the writing of that movie is a neuroscientist. So I started digging into her research. And what I found is that Alzheimer's gene is actually the most prevalent in the Nigerian population. But the Nigerian population has some of the lowest prevalence of Alzheimer's disease. And I thought that was incredibly fascinating. So I had published an article a number of years ago on prevention. How can we prevent this? Late onset Alzheimer's disease, believe it or not, I hear it all the time. Well, my grandma had it, so I'm probably going to get it. This is not a genetic condition. Even if you don't even have the gene, by the time you turn the age of 80, your chances of developing Alzheimer's goes up to about 50% by the age of 80, whether you have a gene on it or not. But so let's just say that your mom had a gene and your dad didn't. So that increases your chance for about 3 times higher to developing Alzheimer's disease. If dad and mom got it, and you have 2 copies of that gene, then now our chances go up by about 12 times. But it still doesn't mean you're going to acquire the condition. So some of the things that we've seen in research that can help prevent dementia is good sleep hygiene. We need at least 6 to 7 hours of good sleep per night. When you sleep, there's these little janitors that go in your brain and kind of clear out things that need to be cleared out, all the fats and lipids. And that's what makes you feel refreshed when you've had a good night's sleep. There's a slew of research on Mediterranean diet, how that's good for your brain. There's lots of cookbooks. My wife has me eating like a rabbit right now. But I do get an allowance, and I've been stopping off at Huff's. I don't know if y'all heard of Huff's. They make the really good sausage biscuits. So I've been eating a lot of those. Do not eat big meals before you go to bed at night. Okay, because your brain has to digest all that stuff. So if you're up watching Diners and Drives and Dives, don't start cooking something at 9 p.m. Just make sure that you eat and have at least 4 hours so that your brain can digest that. We all talk about physical exercise, and that's good. It's great for dopamine and serotonin and all these chemicals in our brain, GABA, all that. But we also forget about the cognitive exercise, because essentially the brain is a pretty lazy organ. And if I asked you to learn French right now, you'd be like, are you kidding me? And you'll probably come to me in like a month or 2 months, and you could probably count to 10, right? Because you have to push your brain. But I'm not talking about crossword puzzles. I'm talking about using the brain to do something that it's never done before. Maybe it's tinkering with a musical instrument, whether it's reading, whether it's tinkering with a foreign language, something that we have to do to keep our mind active. And what happened during COVID with this, and also with socializing? I saw my patients rapidly decline. So we definitely need both of those. Making sure we have a good mood. If you smoke, stop, okay? If you vape, stop. And also maintaining a weight and also alcohol in moderation. Vascular dementia is brought on by either we've had a stroke, we've had multiple strokes, or simply we can have a history of cardiovascular disease, we have history of hypertension, those types of things. Vascular dementia is very characteristic by a change in personality and also changes in walking patterns, where the walking becomes a lot more shuffling in nature. And then also, we do have urinary incontinence and those types of things. And I'll show you what it looks like on a scan. So you can see all these little white specks here. So that's definitely a stroke there, but we can see these little vascular insults. And do you see all this spacing? So that's where we have the atrophy and the shrinking because of the vascular dementia. Now, I want you to think, if we were to take all that away, I want you to think about vascular dementia as two stairwells. Okay, we have a cognitive stairwell and we have a physical stairwell. Cognitively, we can be going along really, really good for a while, and then boom, have a drop. And then we'll plateau and we'll have a drop. And the same thing happens with the physical. We can be going good for a while and have a drop, good for a while and have a drop. We don't know why those drops happen. They're very hard to predict. So it is a little harder for us to predict the progression for vascular dementia. And I'll be honest with you, vascular dementia patients, a lot of times, sometimes just look like Parkinson's patients because they have all the motor issues. Is anybody dealing with vascular dementia in here? You are? Okay. Is that pretty accurate with the stairwell? Yeah, my stepfather had vascular, and there'd be times you think, there's nothing wrong with them. And other times you're like, what just happened? And it can go day by day, it can go minute by minute, it can fluctuate. So some of the things that we'll see is definitely, some of the cognitive impairments. We can have some pseudobulbar effect, where we can have kind of inappropriate laughing or crying kind of out of the blue. Definitely the personality changes. Hallucinations is a big one. I definitely have a lot of hallucinations. I had a vascular dementia patient this morning that kept talking about his wife who has passed away. So she spent the night with him every night. She was in the room with us during the evaluation today. But also he sees children with one leg. Everybody has one limb. All right. And I finally figured out he's getting that because he had a coat rack in his room and it was a pole. So I was like, we got to get rid of the coat rack. But he's mad at me right now because we put him on some medicine for his hallucinations, and everybody's gone away, but his wife's also gone away. So now he's a little frustrated with me. So, but yeah, so the hallucinations, and I view hallucinations in two different ways. If they're threatening in nature, then we need to do something about it. If we are seeing our wife or our parents, those types of things, I don't have a problem with that. And I don't think that we need to address it. And of course, we could have the incontinence and also the changes in speech patterns. So with Lewy body, this is what my father-in-law had. So this one kind of hits close to home with me. I do have a lot of Lewy body patients on my caseload. And how this works is that if we develop, so with Lewy body dementia, if you know what you're looking for, it sticks out like a sore thumb. If you don't know what you're looking for, it may not, you'll miss it. So these patients have extreme hallucinations. Very, very, very vivid hallucinations, delusional. When my father-in-law was in memory care, he thought he worked at the government, and all the people there were his employees, okay? So very vivid delusions, very vivid hallucinations. And then also, a guy that I had last week, they sent his sleep studies to me, and he has REM sleep disorder. So he's having the insomnia. We're not sleeping very well. So if we have all this cognitive stuff that's happening, and then we start to develop Parkinson's, that's Lewy body dementia. If it's reversed and we have all the Parkinson's and then we develop the cognitive issues, then we're dealing with Parkinson's with dementia. Now, what's key about this dementia is that if we treat the psychosis and the anxiety and the behaviors, if we treat it the same way we treat an Alzheimer's patient, we can actually kill these patients. Because the medications, the antipsychotics that we use to treat this, and this happened to my father-in-law, commonly have side effects of causing Parkinson's. So if you give a patient an antipsychotic and it has side effects of causing Parkinson's symptoms, you're gonna make these patients worse. So going back to what type of cancer is it? What stage are we in? We have to know that, because if we're wrong, we can make these patients much, much worse. All right, and then frontal temporal lobe dementia. In my mind, all dementias are just horrific to deal with, but this one is by far the most challenging. I had a guy recently that got arrested and was released, and he was having some hallucination issues and things like that, but he was sitting out by his pool. The cops were there. They called me there to see if I could just kind of calm the guy down. And he's sitting there holding papers in his hand. So we already have aggression. He's already been arrested. He's lost his job for being socially and sexually inappropriate. And now he's got a protection order he's violated. And so I talked to cops, like, let me just speak with him. So I go out there. He's smoking a cigarette. He's looking at his papers. He's very upset. And I said, well, what's on the papers? And he said, well, we're getting a divorce. My wife has filed for divorce. And I said, okay, well, I know some really good attorneys. I can help you. So I'm trying to get rapport. I said, let me see the papers. And he hands me the papers, and guess what? They're blank pieces of paper. And so I acted like they're real. I became a part of his world at that point. So there are different types here. This does start much younger. Bruce Willis has this subtype. He has primary progressive aphasia. And could you imagine having your memory somewhat intact, but you have lost the complete ability to speak or understand speech, but you're still in there? Like, they can conduct their activities of daily living. They can do all their bathing, dressing, toileting, all that, but they lose the complete ability to speak. And unfortunately, it's a very fast-moving, progressing dementia. We have the behavioral variant, which is the most common form, and this is where patients are, again, you start to see them having career issues. They're very socially inappropriate, kind of the loss of the social filter. And again, these dementias do progress very quickly with around a 6 to 8 year life expectancy. And you can see the frontal lobe atrophy there on that slide. So let's jump in. I want to talk a little bit about the medications used to treat memory. As I get into the staging, let's kind of set the stage here. So 0 is good and 7 is profound. These medications are FDA approved to be a part of the plan of care for 0 all the way to 7, okay? They tend to work a little better when they're in the early stages, in that 2 stage, in that 3 stage, even early 4. But I don't see that they really help improve memory past those stages. Now, we've had a couple case studies saying that if we take people off of them, we can see a decline. So if they're not doing anything, that's fine, but we also don't want to take the chance of seeing somebody plummet as we take them off of them. They do come with side effects, obviously. We can have dizziness, we can have nausea, diarrhea. In some cases, patients can have cramping in their upper legs, and then also they can have vivid dreams or nightmares. So if you have a Lewy body dementia patient, do we want to put a patient on Aricept that can cause vivid dreams and hallucinations, right? So just knowing the symptoms there. And I think a lot of times families are given false hope on these medicines, that they're designed to, and I hear it on a weekly basis, I know y'all do too, is that, well, we're on medicine to slow it down. Like these medicines are chemically designed to help improve memory. They're not chemically designed to slow down the progression of the illness. So that's why we have to kind of go in there and educate the families on that, because we don't want to give them false hope that these medicines are actually going to be slowing down the progression of the disease. All right, so there are different types. Let's break down cognition real quick. So when we're assessing patients, we're looking at short-term memory, yes, but we're looking way past that. I look at short-term memory up to about 20 seconds, immediate memory, I look at it up to about 10 seconds. And when I'm assessing a patient, I'm actually timing how long does it take for them to start breaking down. I had a lady yesterday, real sweet lady, she has early onset Alzheimer's. By a minute and a half, she's like moderate to severe. So then I backed it down to about 18 seconds. And she was more mild to moderate. And then I said, okay, I'm going to give you 3 words I want you to recall for me. And I actually repeated the 3 words to her twice, which I'm not supposed to do, set my phone and came back at 9 seconds, and she was only able to get 1 of the 3. So then I can pinpoint to the family, hey, this is when we're starting to break down. Remote memory is, Larry, what was your first pet's name? You forget? That's not helpful, Larry. Where are you from? Let's start with that. All right, there you go. That's remote memory. Okay, those are things that are engraved in our brain. Okay, those are things that are our parents. This is not long-term memory. This is remote memory. So that's something I want to test, because anytime I starting to see slips in remote memory, I know I'm going to see all the other areas of cognition start to slip too. And then episodic memory. Well, let's back up. Semantic memory. What's 3 times 3? 9. I'm glad nobody pulled their phone out. I was helping my daughter with her homework, and that was 3 plus 3. I was like, well, it's 9. She's like, well, how do you know that? And I'm like, okay, it's always been 9. I said it was on the flashcards, but I had it as a kid. So now they got to explain why it's 9. So I was like, well, I'm going to leave that to you. So that's just memory from fact. And then we have episodic memory. How many of y'all can drive home from here and you don't need GPS? Okay, like 7 people. All right. I'm joking. Majority of you, I'm joking. Also, episodic memory is when you take a shower. Guess what? There's sequencing, but you've done this many, many times. And so we're looking at episodic memory to figure out, is there any declines with that? Because it can carry over to the activities of daily living. Common sense, cause and effect, divergent thinking. Let's see who I can pick on this one. Who's going to give me eye contact? Oh, you gave me eye contact. Perfect. Okay. If you were to go out in the parking lot and you had locked your keys in your car, what were 3 things you'd do to get it out?
Probably call somebody.
Call somebody? Okay.
I mean, because
That's one option.
in there, I'm not going to break my window.
That's good. Yeah. Unless you got a really good deductible, right?
Yeah.
Give me one more thing you do. Right, panic.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
So what we're doing here is we're having divergent thinking. This is very high-level cognitive abilities. We have a problem, and we're coming up with the best solution to the problem. I'm glad breaking the window
I
is...
didn't have another set.
There you go. There you go. I'm glad breaking window is not like in there. So these are very high level cognitive thoughts, right? And these are things that fall into what we call executive functioning. And when you're looking at patients and say, okay, can they balance their checkbook? Can they do these types of high cognitive skills? These are the things that we see break down very, very, very early. For example, if we look at sequencing, this is following steps, right? When you eat, when you shower, whatever you do, there's a sequence. You make a pot of coffee, there's a steps that you have to do. And what happens with dementia patients is they'll go into the shower and they don't know how to start that process. And that's that sequencing stuff starting to break down. So that's something I always look for to see if there's any declines at all. And going back to word salad, I always, and I don't know how many of you people have worked with me in here with your loved ones, but if you've ever noticed, I always talk to the patient. Okay, I try to do my best to always talk with the patient. Even if they can't communicate that well, remember that even if a patient can't communicate and they have aphasia, they can't find words, they cannot communicate wants and needs, receptive language is still intact for a long, long time. So don't ever take, and I think I did that at y'all's house last time, I'm always talking with her. And the point is with that is that even if a patient cannot speak, don't think that they can't understand, because they still can. And so the difference in language is here. Now, again, pending the type of dementia, if we have a vascular dementia, we've had a stroke, we may have global aphasia. We may have problems with both of these. If we have like with what Bruce Willis has, right? He definitely has global aphasia where he can't understand or produce speech. So again, it's not only impacting memory, it's much, much more than that. So I want to bring you back to Grace. This is just a few years later from the last clip I showed you just a moment ago.
Oh, tells me so.
Good. Okay, very good. Take some lunch. That's it.
It's been 10 years since Grace was diagnosed as having Alzheimer's disease. I have retired and stay home caregiving for Grace full time.
No, just wait a minute. Just a second there. Just a second. No, just a minute.
Over the years, Grace's condition has deteriorated. Her memory loss is so extreme that she can no longer take care of herself.
She normally can eat reasonably well once I get her started.
All right, so what do we see now? I saw you. Flat affect. Yeah, very flat affect. Yeah. What else? She's impulsive. Yes, she is. And she's also got the agnosia already, right? That's her kitchen. That's where she cooked. She doesn't know where she's at. She's moving around, not knowing her environment. Yeah, good call. What else do we see? To kind of get her started to eat, yeah. But what could she do? She could feed herself. Yes, and I'm going to get in that here in a little bit. It's something that I don't normally lecture too much about, but I do want to bring that up here. Also, if you notice, she never spoke, right? But she still could follow directions pretty well. So she had some understanding of speech, but in terms of actually communication, we had pretty much at that point severe aphasia. So out of this entire lecture, this is where I want you to probably hang with me the most, because this is absolutely critical. The cognitive testing is extremely, extremely important. And I'm not talking about taking a dementia patient and putting these poor patients through a 2-day, 16-hour neuropsychological testing. That kind of stuff should happen early on, not with patients that are more moderate or even further along. The mini mental status exam, and by the way, if you take your loved one to see your primary care doctor, give them the heads up that, hey, we're suspecting there's some memory issues going on here. Can you please do a cognitive test? And I would definitely stay away from the mini mental status exam, because that it literally came from the same tree Adam and Eve ate the apple off of. It's been around for so long. And the problem is too, is that the short-term memory task on it, there's not enough time in between. So I've seen patients score 27 out of 30 on a mini mental and then go and take a slums test, or even the MOCA is not on there, and make a 10. So the mini mental is not a good indicator of cognitive loss. The slums is a great assessment. It gives us a lot of insight into delayed recall. It gives us a lot of insight into language. So it gives us a visual spatial deficits, which I'll talk about that here in a minute. So it does give us a lot more. I'm going to get into the clot drawing test here in just a second. But if we break down the dementia staging, so this is what we're looking like on dementia staging. Dementia staging is really not hard to do. It really, really is not. So if we have these axis areas where we assess the concentration, recent memory, past memory, the orientation, and then the activities of daily living. That's the bathing, the dressing, the toileting, all that. So let's say that a patient has let's say they have a 4 on each one of these areas. Remember, 0's good, 7's bad, right? You remember that, 0's good, 7 bad. So if we have a 4 on everything and we have a 5 on 1, if we add those numbers up and divide by 5, because there's 5 axes, you'll get a number of 4.2. And that's the dementia stage. And so a 4.2 means that we have moderate cognitive impairment with mild dementia. So we separate the cognitive severity out with the severity of the dementia. So MCI comes in at stage 3, and then dementia is coming in at stage 4, but at stage 4, they're mild dementia. Stage 5 is moderate dementia with moderate to severe cognitive decline. And at 6, everything just goes to severe, okay? So what's neat about this is that what I see is that in most patients with late onset Alzheimer's disease, now every patient does progress differently, okay? But in most patients, what I see is that if they're at that 4.2, then typically that 4.2 is going to become a 5.2, so an entire one-stage drop in like 18 to 24 months. Somewhere around in that realm, okay? Now again, every patient's different, but that's what I'm expecting to kind of see. So what I can talk to them at 4.2 is say, hey, listen, in 18 to 24 months, when we get to stage 5, I'll show you here on stage 5, this means that we need 24/7 care, right? So I can give the families a kind of a jump start on the plan of care saying, listen, we don't have to think about this right now, but the next big decision we have to start thinking about is, are we going to try to bring in caregivers to keep them home? Are we going to look at the memory care environment? But that's going to be the next big decision that we have to make, and I can put a timeline to that. And so all of a sudden, when that comes, they're not blindsided like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. They've already looked at memory care environments. They've already brought in caregiver help. They've already done these things. So the key is to understand where are we and what's coming next, and giving these families some kind of time frame. My sister had dementia, and I wish I would have known this stuff, because we didn't know what was happening when she got lost in a parking lot for 3 hours. Okay, we didn't know what to do. In the words of Larry Dotson, his wife went to see, if you don't mind me telling this story, his wife went to go see a neurologist, and they said, what was the diagnosis?
Cortical dementia consistent with a history of anxiety disorder.
Which means like squat. Yeah.
I said, what does that mean?
Yeah. He said, and his response was, go home and watch old movies.
Yeah, when I asked him, what should I do?
Yeah. That's not how we need to help these families and these patients. It is critical to understand what stage we're in, because that's going to help us plan for what we need to do next, right? Because let's be honest, this is not a disease that only affects the patient. It affects you. It affects the caregivers. It affects everybody. It affects us financially. So there's things that we have to look at and help plan for. And so the staging is something that is very, very critical for us to have. I do not want a diagnosis of dementia. I want to know what type of dementia. I want that stage, and that's going to help me figure figure out what's coming next. And it also helps the primary care doctors, the neurologists, all these people, because I get a ton of referrals from neurology that's saying, hey, we just need to know what stage, and it helps them develop a plan of care, right? So the staging is very, very important. Does everybody wonder why we give people clock drawing tests? We don't care if you can draw a clock, okay? I'll tell you that. We are actually looking for visual spatial deficits. Remember, dementia doesn't just impact memory. It impacts everything, right? So if we go back to that apraxia drawn with your left hand, now we have apraxia, we have motor issues with walking, but now we have depth perception problems. So a patient will draw a clock. I mean, I had it happen several times a day. Numbers will go down straight down the middle, or they'll put numbers all on one side. And so that's an indicator to us that the patient does have a depth perception problem. So if we have a depth perception problem, what does it look like when we're walking over a curve? What does it look like if we're walking on pavement to grass? What does it look like if the patient's still driving, right? The depth perception of the car in front of you. And this greatly increases our fall risk. I was consulted on a patient one time out in West Virginia. I flew out there, took a look at her, and immediately knew something was not right. I was like, this is not Alzheimer's. Something's not right. So we did a clock drawing with her, and I want to show you that I did refer for an MRI. I don't know why primary care never did, but I was like, we got to have an MRI, referred over to neurology, and she ended up having normal pressure hydrocephalus. And so, which she had fluid on the brain. So I want you to look at what she was prior to getting the stents to where she, after post-op. So this is where she was before.
What am I doing?
Okay, I want you to draw a clock that shows the time 8:30.
I can't draw.
Well, just the best you can. Give yourself plenty of room.
I ain't got room for 11.
Squeeze it in there best you can.
See how the vision is so tight?
Let it show 8:30.
I can't see my 8.
Just do the best you can there. All right.
Okay. This is her gait pattern. She's trying to walk in a straight direction towards me. See how far we're coming? Off track.
I do, and then
It's almost like she's walking in a boat.
Certain type of patient. I need to go and get it seems like the.
All right.
And this is after she had her stents
Mom,
put in.
I need you to draw me a clock, and we want to see the time 8:30. Draw it as big as you need to. Yeah. There you go. Put all the numbers on it. All right, now show me the time on the clock with a little hand and a big hand for 8:30. Make the clock say 8:30.
I know how to make 8 o'clock.
What does 8:30 look like on the clock? Just try your best. Great.
Much different. And now she's running for the Daytona 500, basically.
Up and walk as fast as you can. As fast as you can. Increase your speed. As fast as you can.
How phenomenal is that?
As fast as you can. As fast as you can. As fast as you can. I'm going to sit down.
So pretty significant difference. So that's why I'm saying when we do the mini mental status exam, it doesn't give us any insight into the visual spatial things. And that's where I can say, hey, we're a high fall risk right now. This is something that I is really kind of near and dear to my heart, is the caregiver burden index. This is actually a test that we can give caregivers. Do you realize statistically that the patient right now is outliving the caregiver? And the ER rates have gone up by 86% for those who take care of loved ones with dementia in the home environment. Because I'm actually doing an assessment tomorrow for a friend of mine that his dad thinks he can do it all himself. And guess what? He's blown out his back, he's blown out both of his elbows and both of his knees. And now he's at the point, I need help. And I can give you all this textbook, because I'm a big nerd, if you haven't picked up on that. I can give you all this textbook stuff about the definition of caregiver burden and all this, but we were doing a Alzheimer's support group at Harmony in Brentwood, and one of the ladies said in there, I'll never forget it, she's like, I look in the mirror and I don't even recognize myself. And I was like, that is the greatest definition of caregiver burden that I've ever seen, okay? So you have to take, you probably heard this, but I'm gonna reiterate again, you've got to take care of yourself, because you can't take care of them if you don't take care of yourself. Whether it's stuff like the Sunny Day program, or whether it's having a sitter come in and help you, because this disease will affect you just as much as the patient. And so you got to have that break, because this is a 24/7 job, and you can't do it by yourself. So we definitely have to have help for the caregivers. Okay, so I'm going to jump into something real quick, that changing gears here. Something I'm seeing more often with patients now is not detecting when we can prevent pneumonia. So have we ever heard of the term pneumonia is an old man's best friend? We heard that? All right. Well, in dementia patients, let me say, what happens when you swallow down the wrong tube? You choke, you cough. What else happens?
Food gets in your lungs.
Gets in your lungs. And then you have a runny nose, you have a watery eyes. Well, it's April. And by the way, my birthday's on April 28th. If y'all need my address for presents, just let me know. I'll give it to you before I leave. Well, right. So what if we took the cough away from it? And it's April, and we're in allergy season, and we're eating, and what are we doing? Eyes are watering, nose are running. We just think, oh, it's allergies. When all of a sudden, then we end up, this patient, I just had a patient this morning, got admitted for aspiration pneumonia in the hospital. So I know this is not really a good picture, especially if you had lunch, but this is a cross-section of a cadaver. We don't want food coming in this area. This little flap, basically your Adam's apple, when you swallow, it moves up, it pushes this flap over, and the food just shoots right down the esophagus. So if we look at a normal one, this is what it would look like. So you don't see anything in the airway here. It's quickly moved straight down to the esophagus. If I turn this guy around and he's facing you, of course, this is the airway right here. And there's no residue left over. So what we would see then is with a vascular dementia patient, this is what that looks like. And if you can see, this is going in the lungs. So he coughs, tries to get up. He has a history of COPD too, by the way. And then you can see that's all off in the lungs. So that's a tremendous risk for pneumonia. So sometimes I'll just walk around and look at my patients if they're in memory care at lunchtime, and I'm just looking around. And all of a sudden, I'll see boxes of tissues on the tables. And it dawns on me like, okay, we need to be watching for these patients because this can be prevented. And this is not a pneumonia that you can get a shot, by the way, and you're not going to get it. This is a very, very serious aspiration pneumonia. And then this is another dementia patient here. What typically happens is that if I see patients where they're chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing, and they have prolonged mastication, they're pocketing food in their mouth, this is what that would look like for a late onset Alzheimer's patient. And gradually what you could see that just gravity is going to start to pull that, whatever this person's eating. Here comes the food. This person should have already swallowed by now. And you could see it keeps coming down. He didn't cough, he just moved, it looks like. And so here's the airways here, so he still has not swallowed. And so you see that chewing and chewing and chewing. These are things that we can certainly prevent. Okay, so and I can tell you that with 100% certainty that 100% of dementia patients will acquire some type of issue with their swallowing, and that's why you do see so many of them develop pneumonia. Okay, so I'm not saying every runny nose this is occurring, but certainly it gives you something to look for if that's occurring. And also losing weight, right? Because food tastes worse. There's so many times I'll go see patients and they say, I'm like, well, how's your appetite? Yeah, it's good. I'm like, what kind of things you're eating? I love ice cream. I love my M&Ms. They start eating sweets more because they can't taste regular food as much. So we get kind of creative. We put honey on food and things like that, and it kind of increases their appetite a little bit. Okay, this statistic, I don't know where it came from. Well, I did actually, and I took away the parenthetical citation for that because I think that's wrong, to be quite honest with you. I think like 90% of my patients have sundowning syndrome. And sundowning is interesting. So most of the people think that sundowning happens at 5 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock at night. We can sundown at 10 o'clock in the morning. It can happen multiple times during the day. But when we're sundowning, believe it or not, sundowning is one of the most easiest things to fix. So if I look at their plan of care and I see, for example, that they're on Seroquel, for example, right? And they're getting it at 8 p.m. or 6 p.m. and they're sundowning at 3, I'm going to call that primary care and say, hey, can we move this to 2 o'clock? Because once that medicine kicks in, guess what happens with sundowning? They're good. Now they may still have some confusion, but they're not agitated. The anxiety's better, all that. So sometimes they could be on the right medicines. They're just at the wrong times. All right. And with that being said, I do want to say on medicines to avoid. So with my dementia training, I have to do 30 hours of training every single year to keep that certification and my CMEs or CEUs up. And this is something they talk about all the time. I'm a firm believer in this. And I think that every primary care doctor would agree with this. There are some benzodiazepines like Xanax, Ativan, Klonopin, all these medications. Now, I know hospice folks use Ativan sometimes for patients, and that's appropriate, okay, because they know what they're doing with that. But these medications can cause people, number one, to fall, or they can actually have the opposite effect sometimes and hype patients up, okay? So now we have apraxia, we have the movement issues, we have the visual spatial deficits, and then all of a sudden we start giving them a Xanax, well, they're gonna start falling. So I had a patient a number of years ago that was falling 3 times a day. So I looked at when they're getting that medicine, guess what? The falls were happening exactly an hour after each one of those medications were being given. So these are medicines that should be used, in my opinion, at PRN at best or as needed. Hospice, again, is a lot different when it comes to this stuff, but in terms of patients that are in that dementia stage from 2 all the way up to 6 area, we got to be very, very careful with those medications, okay? Because they can cause a lot of issues in falling. Okay, I'm going to show you the last clip of Grace. I have a couple things I want to say afterwards, and then I'm going to open it up for some Q&A, okay?
Okay, Gracie. Step down. Come on, step down. Step down. That's a girl. That's the idea. Okay, now this is a real big step. This is a real big step. We're going to have to jump this one. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Here we go. That's a girl. That's the stuff. That's a girl. Okay. Here we go. All right. There we go. There we go. No, wait a minute. Just a minute. Now, you gotta. Let's try this again. Come on up forward here. Come on forward. That's a girl. Push her. That's the stuff. Here we go. There we go, Gracie. Now push your bottom over. That's the stuff. Okay, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be all right. You're gonna be okay. Yeah. It is a pretty day. Isn't this a pretty day, Gracie? That's a girl. That's a girl. You're gonna fuss like that all day long, are you? Huh? You're gonna fuss like that? No, don't do that. That's a girl. That's a girl. You enjoying the ride? Huh? That's a girl. There we go. Okay, now chew and swallow. Gotta chew and swallow. Come on, chew. See, this is how pretty you were there? You still are pretty. You're still pretty to me. Yeah. I can't think of one thing, one specific thing, which is the most difficult to deal with. Of course, I think, I guess I can answer that, and that is the loss of a companion. I guess the point here is that I'm married, but I'm not married. I'm married, but I'm not. You know, I don't have the companionship of the woman that I've lived with for these 40 years. And I guess if there's one thing that I think about as being the critical and greatest loss, it's just that. Grace, this is a picture of us when we were first married. Isn't this a pretty picture? There you are sitting in the chair, and there's me with my arm around you. Isn't that a pretty picture? See? You're my bride here. Well, my memory of Grace, of course, is as of the vivacious, outgoing, loving, considerate, all-fulfilling wife that she was in the most of the days of our marriage. We had a great time together. She was a great helpmate, and I just simply have to remember those days and try to put the days after her diagnosis into the shadow as best I can. Little ones to him belong, they are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me.
So as I mentioned earlier, I have a strong passion for these patients, these families. I think the medical community could do better at not only helping the family, explaining things to the family, where we are, what to look for, and help manage the illness better. And as I mentioned, my sister had dementia. She passed away at the age of 43. My father-in-law was almost killed by given a antipsychotic with Lewy body dementia, and was misdiagnosed of having Alzheimer's disease. Funny story, I actually called the doctor. He was up in Kansas City, and I said, hey, I don't want to step on your territory, but I feel like this is Lewy body disease, and the medication that he's on certainly is making him worse, because it does have side effects of causing Parkinson's. Can we look at something different? And he snipped at me and said, well, I've been treating Alzheimer's for 25 years. And I said, well, it doesn't necessarily make you really good at it though, right? So he hung up on me. We transferred him to Spring Hill to a memory care facility, discharged that medication, and within a week and a half, he was feeding himself again, walking, talking, using the restroom. Again, knowing what type of dementia, having the right plan of care, and I feel like we should do a better job in the healthcare community at listening to the families, and not just seeing you for 5 minutes and doing a mini mental status exam and sending you home. When I'm with patients, how long am I with at least an hour, if not longer. So I think we need more of that. And one of these days we're going to beat the disease. I always have the same prayer. I say it in all my lectures. I have the same prayer every day on the way to work is I don't want to have a job tomorrow. And hopefully we'll beat it one of these days.